JoJo's Bizarre Adventure All-Star Battle R has just wrapped up its Season 1 of DLC characters and has just announced Season 2. So I wanted to make a little video just going over my thoughts and feelings on the Season 1 DLC that we got, and make some predictions on what I think Season 2 is gonna be. So let's start off with the first character, as seen here, is Risotto Nero, the leader of La Squadra from Part 5, Golden Wind. And Risotto is kind of a no-brainer. I'm surprised he wasn't in the base roster. I'm surprised that they put, as much as I love Giaccio and Prosciutto and Pesci I kind of get because they're a unique duo team, and there's nothing like that in All-Star Battle. Well, there wasn't in the base roster anyway. Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't get in. But I think it's good that he did. I think Risotto's a really good addition, probably my favorite addition out of the DLC from Season 1. And he's a fun character to play. I think he's unique. He's more of a set/counterplay kind of character. And does a lot more with their statuses, with his iron abilities. I thought from what little he was in the actual story, CyberConnect 2 really deserve props for adopting his moveset into the roster of playable characters. I thought it was, like I say, I thought he himself was a really good addition, and I thought that how his stand works was implemented well into this fighting game. I get a lot of people were a bit disappointed because of some people believe it like Part 5 as an overrepresentation, and I can see why some people would be upset because we do have a lot of Part 5 characters and we could do with having some other parts that are a bit less represented, but I am pretty biased since Part 5 is my favourite part in the series, so most characters that are getting in, I'm going to enjoy them personally. So they come from Part 5, so I can't really complain. So overall, I thought Risotto was a really good inclusion, both just as a character that I really like, and in terms of him being a unique character gameplay-wise compared to the rest of the roster. I really like him, so Risotto for me was a success. Now let's move on to the next character. Now, what was a little bit of a mix-up was the next character addition was in fact not part of the Season Pass technically. This was free DLC that was put into the game in coinciding with the release of the final batch of the Part 6 anime, and this was the inclusion of Weather Report and what is called in this game Father Pucci Final. Now what that means was, when the game initially released, Pucci was in the game, but it was only with his initial stand. Spoilers for the game in general, and the JoJo anime and manga and all that good stuff. Yeah, if you're not caught up, probably don't watch this. Whoopsie. So anyway, Pucci only had his initial stand, Whitesnake, and was given a complete, mostly new moveset with a level 3 to go along with his level 1, where he swipes into your head and takes your stand disc away. In All-Star Battle on the PlayStation 3, he did have all of his stands, where he had the Green Baby mechanic, which could turn his stand into Sea Moon, and then his level 3 would be turning it into Made in Heaven. So initially when the game came out and Pucci only had Whitesnake and that super he tried to do available, you know, everyone who'd played the original game knew there was something up, something wasn't quite right. And that was because he was taken out, the Father Pucci Final was taken out to avoid spoilers for the Part 6 anime. So when the final batch rolled around, Pucci was put back in all of his full glory, with the added addition of Weather Report, who was a brand new character. He was in Eyes of Heaven, the previous game by CyberConnect 2, but he was not in the original All-Star Battle. So in this context, he is a completely brand new character, and he is really, really, really fun. I think he was also not included in the base roster because of his moveset being a spoiler for the ending of Part 6, and obviously with the anime being so heavily publicized, and JoJo's being a lot more popular than it was in 2012, 2013 when All-Star Battle came out, they didn't want to spoil the Part 6 anime. And Weather is really, really fun to play. I kind of wish he was in the base roster so we could get more of a vibe on his moveset, and he could be in the game more. But I like him. I like his inclusion. I'm so happy he got in. He was the last kind of big Part 6 character I really wanted. He was the big one in the Stone Ocean crew that I really wanted in anyway. And of course, Father Pucci's been kept exactly the same as he was in ASB. I think it would have been cool to give Moon a super, whether that's like a level 1 one, or if they want to keep his level 3 super being his transformation into Maiden Heaven, then you know what, whatever, that's fine. But I kind of wish Moon did also get a level 1 like Whitesnake does, so it feels less not useless, because Pucci as Moon is still a good character. But I just wish it gave Moon a lot more going on, because Moon is my favorite of Pucci's stands. So yeah, I just wish it had more utility by having a super, but that's not really neither here nor there. But it's good that Part 6 is getting so much love, technically getting the 3 new characters in original Pucci, who is, I believe, substantially different from original All-Star Battle Pucci. FF and, of course, Weather. That's pretty much everyone you'd want for Part 6, I think. Like, as the main important characters. But I'm really glad that these characters are completely free. They're not actually a part of the Season Pass, technically. They were just introduced between Risotto and the next Season Pass character as DLC. But it was just like a free download for everybody. So I'm super happy they did that. And I'm kind of hoping we get maybe a couple more free characters for the Season 2 Pass, because this is maybe talking about a bit too early, but just 3 characters, it's kind of underwhelming. You know, having not at least as much as the last Season Pass, I'm not a fan of that, but we'll have to see. I'll talk more about that when we actually get into Season 2, but I've kind of said everything I want to say about Pucci and Weather, so it's on to the next DLC character. After Weather and Pucci, the next DLC character in the Season 1 pass was none other than Rudolf von Stroheim. And he is pretty much the only character from Part 2 I think was really missing. That was a big essential part of the cast. I'm honestly surprised he also wasn't included in the base roster, considering he was like the only Part 2 character they could realistically put in that a lot of people would want. The only other character I could really think of, and this is kind of at a stretch, is like Santana maybe. But you know, I just like Santana because of the name personally. I've got no feelings about him as a Pillar Man. And Stroheim, yes, he is kind of an essential inclusion for the Part 2 cast. And I guess they put him in because he was the only other character from Battle Tendency they could realistically put in, so it kind of diversifies the roster. But Stroheim's probably one of the few DLC characters that I really don't like in terms of his gameplay. He's special R1, obviously he doesn't have a stand or hammer or anything like that, so he's got his cyborg body, and his cyborg body, when you press R1, brings out the UV rays, and it changes his moveset a bit, and I quite like his normal moveset, where he's got like the machine gun chest and stuff like that, but the UV light moveset, he just feels really clunky and slow to me, and I'm really not a fan of it. I guess my favourite thing about Stroheim is that he's got a kind of super where if he's lying on the ground, he can pull out a grenade and kill himself, and make do some massive damage on your enemy, and like completely break their guard in one hit. I think it does if they block it. But Stroheim to me is just not my cup of tea as a character. He's a bit too slow, he's a bit too clunky. I mean, it makes sense because he's like a robot man, that he's very slow and kind of harder hitting. But even then, I don't feel like he does enough damage for him to be like the slow, hard hitter archetype character. But I appreciate his inclusion. He is a funny character. But his gameplay, it was honestly just kind of a miss for me. Now, the next character that was introduced in the DLC pass was honestly a pick that I thought was completely out of left field. I was not expecting it at all. It was Keicho Nijimura from Part 4, the brother of Okuyasu. And I kind of thought he was a left field pick mainly because just he wasn't in Part 4 very long. I didn't think they'd be able to come up with like a really super unique moveset for him, but they absolutely did. His whole thing, obviously, he's got his stand bad company of the little toy soldiers, but he changes from infantry as his like normal moveset to tanks and helicopters by pressing R1, which does change up his moveset a little bit. And he is quite an oddball character. I'm not very good with him at all, but I appreciate his inclusion. I think that's kind of what DLC is all about. You need to have a mix of the heavily requested characters and the kind of oddball out of left field characters to keep things interesting. Again, playstyle wise, he's not my cup of tea personally, but I do like him more than Stroheim. And his level 3 super is badass. Actually, I think both. His level 1 super, it is a little bit disappointing. It is just kind of whatever. But his grab and his super, his level 3, they go hard. I absolutely love that. I mean, that's seen anyway in the manga and the anime, where all the infantry are surrounding Josuke and he's ordering them to fire. That was already a really, really good little sequence, and that was amazing kind of to pull from. But yeah, no, I think they just went really hard on his super, and I really enjoyed it. But yeah, like I say, playstyle wise, just Keicho's just personally not a character I would go for. He's very much kind of a weird, not setup character per se, but kind of a stand back and kind of a more stand back and like plan things out in advance type of character, which absolutely fits Keicho's personality. So they definitely got that part right. That I think deserves some props. But yeah, just like I say, I appreciate his inclusion, just not my cup of tea in terms of a character pick, in terms of a main. I'm more into the rush down kind of characters personally. But I like him. He's a bit of an unpopular character from what I've seen in terms of a DLC pick, but I personally like him. If they were going to go for a Part 4 character, I think he was a pretty wise inclusion. And last but not least is the final character of the Season 1 All-Star Battle R Pass, is Alternate Universe Diego, or in other words, Diego with the World. And this character seems to be a bit controversial. First of all, you've already got Diego in the base roster, original Diego Brando with Scary Monsters. So really, if they were going to pick a Part 7 character, they've already got the Dio representation, so I get people being mad in the sense that it's not a very creative pick, and, you know, it could be seen as kind of lazy since they've already got the model both from Diego being in this game already, and Alternate World Diego being a part of Eyes of Heaven's roster as well. I've seen some people also try to say that he's lazy because he's an Eyes of Heaven original character when he's not. If you've read the manga, you know that Alternate Universe Diego is its own character in the actual story. Yeah, again, spoilers for JoJo. Alternate Diego is not an OC for the CyberConnect 2 games. He is a real character. Please stop saying this, because it's not true, and it's kind of annoying as to why people might have a problem with him being in the game. And I think people are kind of mad because this character is absolutely broken. He seems absolutely busted from what I can see. He just, like, the rest of the cast just seem to really struggle to properly compete with him. I'm not 100% sure of the competitive of the meta, but just from what little I've researched, yeah, Diego seems to be a bit of an absolute menace. So there's that to consider. But I think kind of the main reason some people are upset is you already have Diego Brando in the game, and in terms of Part 7's representation, you know, they don't have a ton of characters compared to some other parts, say for example 3, 5, or even 2 or 6. So you've got Johnny and Gyro, you've got President Valentine, and you've got new to this base roster, Diego Brando. You could have had Mountain Tim. Just pulling some characters out of thin air. Just literally pulling some characters out of my ass that I can think of right now. You've had Soundman, Blackmore, Maiko, Hot Pants, Ringo Road again, Weka Pipo. And those are just like a couple characters that I just, have thought of in the moment because it's been a while since I've read Part 7. Like, those are characters I can think can have a at least unique moveset. And Diego does have at least a semi-unique moveset. I mean, he's doesn't summon his stand because he's already on a horse, and you use R1 to get on and off the horse, so he's kind of a hybrid of just a normal brawler kind of character and a horse user like the rest of Part 7. And I really like Diego's moveset itself. Like, him and his supers are amazing. Both the level 1 and the level 3, they are both animated beautifully in my opinion, so it's not his moveset that's the problem. I think it's the fact that it's just another Dio. See, and I didn't even consider this. We've already got Dio Part 3 with the world. We've already got the time-stopping Dio. So this is kind of overkill. So I'm kind of conflicted on how I feel about him, because as a character, I think he's really, really, really fun to play, but in terms of Part 7 representation, it's kind of a lot to be desired. So I guess it just depends on what you find more important. Like, do you find the character's raw moveset and gameplay the most important, or do you find providing representation across all of JoJo's to be more important? I think that's kind of a you have to decide yourself kind of thing. I'm personally kind of torn, but I'd be really interested to see what people think of alternate Diego in the comments. So, Season 1 of All-Star Battle Law's DLC has been a little bit of a mixed bag, I would say, and I think that's kind of the general consensus of the JoJo's fan base, that, it wasn't awful, but it did leave a bit to be desired, the DLC picks. Which leads me on to the speculation for Season 2's character roster. Now, we know the parts that they're going to be in and the order that the DLC will be released. So we know that the first character is going to be from Part 5, the next character is going to be from Part 4, and the final character of the Season Pass is going to be from Part 8. That's all we know so far. We know generally when these characters are going to be released, but all we know is just they'll be from Part 5, Part 4, and Part 8 respectively. So let's go over a couple of candidates on who I think the DLC is going to be. So let's start with the first character, and that will be the Part 5 rep. So I think it's going to be either Chocolata and Secco. I'll go from least likely to likely. So I think Chocolata and Secco could be one. They've already got kind of the blueprint for a duos character in Pesci and Prosciutto, and they are kind of a more notable couple of side villains that aren't from La Squadra. They are the kind of royal guard for Diavolo. So I could see CyberConnect being like, yeah, Diavolo's kind of elite guard. They aren't really represented, so let's put these guys in as DLC. But I think the much more likely candidate, actually one that I think is least likely, but it's just my little crackpot theory, is they could do a semi-clone of Diavolo and have Doppio as just fully playable, just having like the arms, having like that being a faster but weaker version of Diavolo, with like some of his moves being the same and having the arms of King Crimson and Epitaph. I could see them kind of wanting to make use of the model they already have for Doppio, but there's just really no basis for why I think he'd be in the game. It's just kind of my personal crackpot theory, and I think is the least likely. But what I do think is the most likely, and what I hope for the most, to be honest, from a Part 5 rep, is Abakio. Now, if you didn't know, Abakio has quite a long history of being snubbed from specifically CyberConnect 2 JoJo games. He was meant to be in All-Star Battle's original roster, but it just didn't pan out. He was considered for DLC, but Fugo was putting over him, and he was this close to being an Eyes of Heaven, to the point where they actually have a model all mapped out for him, and you can actually see it in the end credits of Eyes of Heaven, the Abakio model that they have, but they just couldn't get Moody Blues to work in like an Abakio versus Abakio setting. So that's kind of the only reason why he was cut. It was literally at the final hour, they just couldn't get him to work in a mirror match, and they just had to make a decision to cut him. So I think it's only fair that the final member of Bucciarati's team is going to be the one who gets to be put in Season 2's DLC pass. It is way overdue to be in a JoJo's fighting game. And I want to see him as my second favourite member of Bucciarati's crew. I'm always bummed out when he got cut, so I really, really want to see him. I really, really want to see him included in this game, because I think it'd be so unique. There's so many ways you could take the character. He could be like a very counters-focused character. He could be like a very illusions-based, with Moody Blues repeating things. He could be like a good rushdown character with Moody Blues repeating the punches that he does. I just think there's a lot of ways you could take him, and it would be really interesting to see him in the game. So he is the one I am most hoping for, and I think is the most likely to be the Part 5 representative. Now this is the one that I had the hardest time thinking about, because the second rep of Season 2's DLC will be from Part 4. And to be honest, for Part 4, I think they've got all the big characters covered. Honestly, I thought Keicho was kind of like I said, Keicho was a very out of left field pick. But really, I don't think Part 4 needs any more reps, because they've got loads and loads of characters in, and they've really got all of the important cast, to be honest. But from what I've been thinking, I've come up with 3 candidates. The one I think is the least likely, but just would be really funny, is Tonio, the chef from Part 4. He's one of my favourite side characters, and I just think it would be really funny to see him put in a fighting game, because he would be completely out of place, completely out of his depth, and I just think it would be really, really funny to see him square off with like Diavolo or Funny Valentine, or have unique dialogue with the Part 5 crew, because if you didn't know, in Purple Haze Feedback we know that one of the main antagonists from Purple Haze Feedback is actually a relative of Tonio's. I know it's kind of questionable if Purple Haze Feedback isn't canon, but All-Star Battle R does take some things from Purple Haze Feedback. Well, Fugo did in the original DLC, and that's included in this game. So, you know, that could be fun. But like I say, I just think it's the least likely. And the next two, honestly, I couldn't think of which one would be less or more likely, to be honest. So I'm kind of putting them together at a tie. One I do think is slightly more realistic on getting in, but the other, I don't know, I'm not sure about. So my 2 picks are Yuya Fungami, the user of Highway Star, and who I think is a little less likely, but I personally want to see more, Mikitaka, the alien from Part 4. Just with being a shapeshifter, you could go crazy with his moveset. He could be a very, like, dodgy kind of character, like, literally just focused on a lot of dodging. You could really take that character anywhere, because he doesn't fight at all in the series, really. I mean, he does a little bit against Superfly, but he doesn't really fight. He just kind of puts himself in harm's way to protect Josuke and Okuyasu. But I could see them doing Yuya, because he would seem easier to make a moveset off of. I could see him as a very, like, his stand comes in and gets you. His stand off would just be like the disembodied hands and feet, and the stand on would be the stand itself fully formed. I could see them going with that. That would make a lot of sense to me. And because you do see Yuya in more combat focused settings, yeah, it just makes a lot more sense for him to be put in. I've seen a couple people say that, I forgot his name, the Enigma stand user, I think his name is Teranosuke, but I forget. I've seen a couple of people advocate for him, which I was really surprised by. I'm not sure anyone remembered or gave a shit about him, but I personally don't think he's really likely at all. I mean, if they put him in, I could see him being a very counter-focused character, kind of like Risotto, but I just think Yuya is definitely the most likely, and the person I think we're going to see in Part 4's rep for the All-Star Battle Season 2 DLC. And finally, probably the most talked about ever since the Season 2 pass was announced, a rep from Part 8 JoJolion. Now this is way, way fucking overdue, because Part 8 has only had Gappy in Eyes of Heaven. Not Eyes of Heaven, sorry, in All-Star Battle. And Gappy, his moveset from the original JoJo All-Star Battle, his moveset was based on the first like 13 or so chapters, I believe, of Part 8, so there really was not a ton to go off of at all. But you know, he was important because he was the next JoJo's. He was the next JoJo. He was very important, and he still is. So it was essential that he was put into the roster at the time, and I'm super glad that he is. But Part 8 has been in desperate need of another character. Now there's a couple of characters that I could see that they could go down with, and I can see 4 potential options. What I think is personally the least likely, Jobin. Now Jobin, he's not the main villain, but he is a major character and one of the few characters with a very combat-focused stand in Speed King. So I could see them being, yeah, Jobin, you know, he's popular, he's well known, he's got, you know, a certain set of abilities that are a lot more suited for combat. Let's put him in and have him as the final DLC. And I personally wouldn't be disappointed, but the fact that he's not a main villain, and he's not really I say isn't a main character per se. He is obviously a member of the Higashikata family, but he is introduced to the story quite late, and he's not in it a ton. He is a prominent character, but he isn't in it like a ton. So I personally just see him being the least likely. Now, what I think is quite likely, but is by far the most disappointing, is Joshu. Now, Joshu was in Eyes of Heaven. He was the only other JoJolion rep that was a playable character in that game. There was the Higashikata house where there was all the family like sat in the porch, but they obviously weren't playable. They were just little background elements, and Joshu was the only other Part 8 cast member that was a playable character. Now, I could see them going for this, as this realistically is the easiest option to go for, and they have made a track record of porting characters from Eyes of Heaven and just using that as DLC. Obviously it was done with Stroheim, it was done with Weather technically, because Weather was also in Eyes of Heaven, and it was done with Alternate Universe Diego. But I think this is, although like I say, it is something that CyberConnect 2 definitely would do because they have a track record of it, I think this is less likely than some people think. Now, I get trying to keep your expectations clear and not, like, hyping yourself up for disappointment, but I think there's a reason why JoJolion is the last character roster. So, I really do feel like if it was going to be Joshu, why wouldn't they put that first? To be like, okay, yep, here's another Part 8 roster, it's Joshu, let's just get it out the way. You know, you finally got a Part 8 rep, shut up and be happy about it. Let's focus on other characters now because we don't care about Part 8. But they didn't do this. I think they very deliberately chose Part 8 to be the last character slot in the DLC, and I think they did that deliberately because they know that the fan base really wants a new Part 8 rep. So I think it's going to be a new character, and it's going to be either an updated version of Gappy with Soft and Wet Go Beyond and having a completely new and different moveset, kind of like what they've done with Poochie and Poochie Final. Again, they've set a precedent for that, having the same character be used as like a separate slot, but with different movesets. And I wouldn't hate that, but I think it would be really disappointing for the only other Part 8 character to be just the same character again with new moves. What I think is the most likely, and what I am personally really rooting for, is Toru, the user of Wonder Review and the main antagonist of Part 8, because every other part of JoJo's represented in this game has the main JoJo, and it has the main antagonist. Obviously, you've got Jonathan and Dio, you've got Joseph and the Pillarmen, specifically Cars, you've got Jotaro and Part 3 Dio, you've got Josuke and the two Kiras. I mean, even in the original game, Kosaku Kira was in the base roster, Yoshikage Kira was DLC. For Part 5, you've got Diavolo. For Part 6, you've got Poochie, both just White Snake and all of his stands Poochie. For Part 7, you've got Johnny and Funny Valentine. And for Part 8 to be the only part where the main villain isn't represented is really weird. But what I've heard most people say to kind of contradict why this would be the case is Wonder Review is not really a combat stand at all. How can you make a stand with such a overpowered and kind of weirdly specific moveset work in a fighting game? And that's kind of what their job is to do. There's so many characters in this game where being in a fighting game is pretty unconventional. Just off the top of my head, I can think of Gyro, I can think of Foo Fighters, I can think of Prosciutto and Pesci, I can think of Giacho, I can think of Keicho. There's a lot of characters where it wouldn't seem like... I can think, hey, Shigechi, for crying out loud. I just think there's a lot of people who aren't given the people that puts these, who puts all the thought and time and talent into these movesets a lot of credit. I think if they really wanted to and they really kind of put their minds to it, they absolutely could make a moveset for Toru that would make sense for him. And like I say, he is the only main villain in the series that is not represented in this game. It is the only thing that makes sense to me, and I don't know if I should really talk about this, but I've seen in the JoJo's, I'm not a part of it, but I've just seen screenshots kind of floating around, so I'm not 100% sure if this is real, so please take what I'm going to say with a grain of salt. Apparently the community manager for JoJo All-Star Battle R, the social media guy, has said that we should keep our eye out for the Part 8 rep and that we won't be disappointed with what's next. Kind of very much alluding that it's not going to be Joshu, because it was kind of directly in response to someone asking, is Joshu going to be the final character? Yeah, and he just said not to be, to keep an eye and not to be, and that you won't be disappointed. So that to me does if that is true, and this insider does get a heads up on what character is going to be in the game, which is certainly possible. That might be him trying to say, hey, look, don't worry, we've got this. Toru is coming, or someone unique is coming, and that person I think is Toru. So just to kind of recap, who do I think is the most likely / the characters I most want to see in this game? So for Part 5, it is absolutely Abakio, no question about that. For Part 4, I could go either way on Mikitaka or Yuya, but my heart's kind of leaning towards Mikitaka. I personally prefer him as a character to Yuya, but I think Yuya is the more likely choice. And for Part 8, I hope against hope, I'm putting all my bets on Toru, baby. I do think Toru's gonna come clutch for the finale of the Season Pass. And, that's just the ones that we know. I mean, like I say, I don't want to get people's hopes up, but there is a chance that maybe some free DLC could be put in between as well. Maybe 1 or 2 characters would be put in as a free update. Maybe Jodio, who knows? We've seen him in a couple of combat situations in JoJo Lands, not in any great detail, but he's been in a couple of fighting situations, so maybe he's got a chance of being put in as an extra little freebie, or maybe just someone else that we don't know about. Maybe another character from Araki's previous mangas. Who knows? But just something a little bit extra, it would really be appreciated. I would personally be really, really, really grateful if we could just get another extra little surprise from the Season 2 pass. But if we don't get one, then, it's understandable. It's disappointing, but it's ultimately understandable. And that is my thoughts and feelings on Season 1's DLC and the upcoming, who I think is going to be included in JoJo All-Star Battle Season 2 DLC. So yeah, thank you so much for watching the video. I know this is not my usual scripted content, but I just wanted to gush about JoJo's, because this game's kind of got a lot of criticism, but I love it. I love the original All-Star Battle. I'm a big fan of this. I think it's really, really improved the game. I love that this game is being supported, because I was really, really not thinking that we were gonna get anything past Season 1. So the fact we are getting new characters, and especially Part 8 rep, that's really doing it for me. So yeah, please tell me your thoughts on JoJo's All-Star Battle. Who do you like to play? Who do you think's gonna be in? What's your dream picks? Thank you so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Maybe I'll do more content on JoJo's All-Star Battle and the other games in the future, or just the series in general, if people like it, because JoJo's one of my favorite series. So I love talking about it. I'll use any excuse to talk about JoJo's. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.